Hello. Hi. So there's like a lot of things I want to talk about, but I'm still getting questions about structure, which is not surprising because structure is very complex. And in fact, there's a lot of professional screenwriters who don't understand it. You would be surprised. Case in point being Avatar 2. One of the greatest screenwriting structuralists of all time, I believe, is James Cameron. At least I learned a lot from him in his structure, particularly in Terminator, T2, Aliens. Really great structure, interesting structure too. It's a lot to be said about Aliens because weirdly it has a 52-minute or 48-minute first act. I timed it once, but yet it's still structurally very, very, very sound. But then you go to Avatar 2, and it is a structural disaster. And you could say the same thing about The Abyss as well. Um, uh, Obviously, Titanic its structure is very visible on the surface. I mean, the third act is what the ship sinks. Oh wait, there we hit an iceberg. So, but I learned a tremendous amount about structure. But again, even somebody like him can fuck it up massively at times. So, full grasp of structure is very important fundamentally to screenplay. And if I'm going to go forward and talk about things, at least understand the way I think of structure will be important because I'm going to reference it a lot. So, given the fact, or what some people think is a fact, that a picture is worth 1,000 words, I made a quick schematic of what the way I view structure, and I'll share it with you. I'll talk to you about it briefly. But this is fundamental. I mean, some people are out there going to know this code. But then there's some other people who are just getting started or just a script or two, it's still a little fuzzy in their minds. And as simplistic as this is, I think it can be helpful to a lot of people. So here we go. So I put this into a pyramid because that's the way I feel about scripts, because scripts are emotional. And the emotions cascade and they accelerate as the screenplay goes on through the acts, and until the crescendo at the very top of the pyramid with the resolution. So in any event, very quickly, Act One is usually between 21 and 30 pages, anywhere in there. I don't like to use rules like that, but I think especially for beginning writers, it's very helpful to corral yourself into following that particular set of rules. Obviously, this applies to relatively simple scripts. Very complex scripts can be completely different, wildly different. They can have much longer first acts. It just depends. But for most mainstream movies, this will apply. So your first act ends about somewhere between 21 and page 30. Now again, there is no mathematics that can prove this. The page count where acts generally break is based on one thing, and that is fundamentally human patience. Where people's patience begins to run out, generally in terms of the audience, where their general patience begins to run out in terms of, okay, what is this about? Or let's get this show on the road. Generally around 20 minutes to 30 minutes in, that's when their patience, their little voice on their side of their shoulder speaks into their ear and says, what the hell is this movie about? And you really don't want to lose them at any point, but especially not at the beginning, right? So, so the first act is built around the equilibrium of the world that you're being introduced to. This is a general rule. It is not an absolute rule, but the simple fact of the matter is that for things to get fucked up, they first have to be going well. And so this is, you introduce the world, you introduce the characters, and they're usually, not always, the world's going very well. We can look at a movie of mine called like Law Abiding Citizen, which has a relatively clear first act, where Jamie Foxx is a district attorney and his record of prosecution is great. Things are going well. He got some justice in a case for Clyde Shelton. Things are looking great, but then, somewhere around page 30, there's a but. And then the but shows as I think, a very simplistic but clear way to talk about how acts break. Everything's going fine, but then something happens, something changes. And in this case, in the case of Law Abiding Citizen, clearly what changed was that Clyde Shelton told him, no, sorry, you think you're running the show, but I got news for you, I'm running the show. Now everything's changed, and we move into the second act, and that's turmoil. Now that I think about it, Law Abiding Citizen is a really good example of this, because the second act is complete turmoil for the protagonist, Jamie Foxx, because nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what this guy's up to. Nobody knows what he's going to do next, and nobody knows how he's doing it. So he's in complete turmoil. Everybody, the entire system, everybody around him is in complete turmoil. The second act is fundamentally an ants nest kick. Now, that can be different for different kinds of movies. For different kinds of movies, in romances, there are extreme romantic setbacks. It turns out that the woman you love has been betrothed by their parents in an arranged marriage to the prince of so-and-so. It applies almost across the board and across all genre films, and I do stress the word genre, not all of them, but most genre films. And the acts is usually go from 21 to 30 to about 85 to 90. Now, it used to be sort of standard long ago, in fact, that their screen page length generally was 120 pages long. I think things have changed. I think the audience patience has changed. Movies have grown shorter, more compact. People are making leaner movies now. I'm not saying they're better, but they're definitely leaner. And so I really think that 110 is really kind of the outside these days, generally speaking, for a movie that is not a sequel, that is a first movie, like a movie like Taken or something like that. The proper place that a value that it has, because movies are a lot like food for people, or meals, I should say. They're sort of a perfect length to eat a meal, for you to enjoy it with friends. And then there's a point when it's too short. It's like, oh, it's too short. And then there's a point where it's dragging on. So I think right now, as a general rule, particularly for writers that are starting out, or even writers that have a little experience, this is a good place to live in the 110 realm, for the totality of the script. And the second act is generally around 50 to 60 pages long. And it ends somewhere around 85 to 90. And you'll notice when you're writing, a little voice will whisper in your ear and saying, hey man, we need to get on with this. What's going on? Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up. So, and as I put it here, the turmoil is counterbalanced against the protagonist struggling to regain or reestablish equilibrium over seeing the insurmountable obstacles. If you haven't seen Law Abiding Citizen, this is not much of help. But if you have, you see this is exactly what the second act is there. But something happens. By the end of the second act in Law Abiding Citizen, Jamie Foxx has pretty much fed up, and he's had it with trying to reestablish equilibrium by using the only tool he knows, which is the law. And taking a cue from Clyde Shelton himself, he decides to reestablish equilibrium by using Clyde Shelton's means, which is to go outside the law and to break it if necessary. And that means we're in the second act. And that is him, in a handful of scenes, him coming with his sidekick, Danny Dunnigan, detective or police investigator Danny Dunnigan, to the solution, which is, as Jamie Foxx pithily, Nick Rice pithily states it in the third act, fuck his civil rights. And then the rest of the movie is him pursuing that solution until equilibrium is restored, and then the credits come up, and your name comes up, and in lights, and everybody claps, and you're pleased speech. And that is fundamentally screen structure in a nutshell. And again, the pyramid is a visual representation of how everything gets faster. The world gets smaller. At the beginning, the world is a world of infinite possibilities. It's the base of the pyramid. Anything can happen. There's no pressure on the world. There's no pressure on the world. But at the end of Act One, pressure starts to exert itself, and the world becomes smaller. The world of possibilities becomes smaller. Law Abiding Citizen, again, is a good example of this because Jamie Foxx's world is getting smaller and smaller as Clyde Shelton, who is a personal adversary, but the adversary can also be like a Roland Emmerich world. It can be, again, a comet hitting the Earth, or the Earth freezing, something like that. But whatever it is, generally the air starts going out of the bag, things get more tighter. The options that the protagonists have are less and less and less, and they're racing to save their lives. So again, the first act is introducing your characters and telling why we should care. That's important because just introducing characters, usually it's like this. When you say why should I care, well, it doesn't mean that they have an animal rescue farm necessarily, but why should I care is fundamentally, to me, refers to the commonalities in the protagonist that we all share. In Law Abiding Citizen, for instance, Jamie Foxx's commonality is ambition. He's defined by wanting to be successful. He's not a bad guy. He's not blindly ambitious. He's not rolling over people. He believes he's doing the right thing. And we like him. So we do want to see him succeed. And he's kind of a slightly imperfect man or close to perfect man in an imperfect system. But he's obeying, his imperfection lies in the fact that he is obeying an imperfect system. And Clyde Shelton's going to show him the error in his ways, to be sure. And so, of course, that's why we care. And that is directly related to Clyde Shelton when he pops up and says, cancel your lunch with Judge whatever his name is. I'm running the show now. That not only it not only gets directly into the path of the ongoing case, but it also gets in the path of Nick Rice's personal ongoing stakes. So one thing I didn't put here is that all movies, or all good movies, I think, and again, a general rule, have both personal and universal stakes. I mean, these aren't talking about theatrical movies. I'm not here about sort of more personal art films, which one can also appreciate. David Lynch's movies are not like this, and they're great. But generally speaking, there are personal and universal stakes. And Taken, for instance, Liam Neeson's character's personal stakes are very clear. They're his daughter. But universal stakes are human trafficking. And he's going to break up a human trafficking ring that threatens all of us. So the why I care is that Nick Rice is a very ambitious guy who has a family man who we want to see succeed. But on a universal level, we care about law and order. And so it's an interesting script in a weird way because Nick Rice and Clyde Shelton are actually the same character. They're two sides of the same character. I combined them. I took one character and split it apart. The one person, and we're all like this, who respect the law, but there's another part of us that see that it is not a perfect system. So Nick Rice is the side that respects the law, and we want to see him succeed, but also at the same time, we want to see his alter ego, Clyde Shelton, succeed as well in avenging himself and correcting the wrongs of the system. So that's a little bit atypical to break up, to shatter a character into two pieces and make them the why I care about the world. But it is interesting. It's fairly sophisticated too to have the why I care be. I care about both these guys, and the protagonist and the antagonist, which is a bit of a hat trick. But anyway, I think you get the idea. And I've probably said enough about this back. And so I hope that was a little bit helpful, and using visuals a little bit helpful in terms of clarifying for some of you out there exactly how structure works in a very simple way. But I think that's actually a pretty good schematic of it because it shows the acceleration and it shows the real building blocks of how it goes and of how screen structure and narrative structure proceeds and resolves itself into an end. But it begins with equilibrium, and at the very point of the pyramid, it finishes with equilibrium. And write if you have any questions or comments. And I hope that was helpful. And see you next time.